Good morning, everybody. My name is Christine Guthrie. I'm the new president of Charles River Rotary, and I want to welcome you to this morning's meeting on the opiate crisis in MetroWest. We just began the way for those of you who aren't familiar with Rotary, we just began the way all of our Rotary meetings begin, and we're so thrilled to have you here today as part of this meeting. As I said, I'm the president of Charles River Rotary. We are a regional Rotary breakfast club that serves Natick, Framingham, Wellesley, and Ashland. We meet here in the Hampton Inn every Thursday at this time. I'm just going to speak a minute today, and then I'm going to be followed by our guest speaker, Chief Hicks of the Natick Police. After that, we will hear from Cheryl Lucenta of SOAR Natick, Katie Sugarman of the Natick Opioid Task Force. We are also joined today, and very lucky to be joined by Chief Davis of the Framingham Police and Deputy Chief Trask of Ashland. They are also invited to contribute. I'm so sorry. We're happy you're here. They're welcome to contribute today as well, and we're lucky to have them here as a resource. I want to begin by letting you know what we gave you as you entered the room. Everybody should have gotten these materials. There's a booklet that's hot off the presses. If you don't have them, they're right outside. This was created by the Natick Opioid Task Force. It hasn't been distributed yet, but they shared it with us for today. It has a great amount of information and resources. It says something's happening in Natick on the front of it. There's also a list. It says we can help. This is a lot of people in responding to this meeting and hearing about this news have said, what can we do to help? We feel helpless. So what we did is we asked people. We asked Cheryl Lucenta, who runs SOAR, that is a group of mothers who have children who are recovering addicts. And asked her, what can we do? What can we do to support? She provided a list. The Natick Opioid Task Force, Katie Sugarman, gave us a list of ideas. You'll see on there, we'll be talking about it later. A lot of it is resources, but also help from the community and from businesses. Most importantly, I want to say that I'm so grateful that everybody's here on such short notice to address this crisis in our community. We're here because in recent days we have lost members of our community. We also have community members with broken hearts and first responders who are working more than overtime, and they need to know that they have our support. The only way to really show support is to take action, not to react. Of course, there's an emotional reaction to the recent tragic events. However, reaction does not create sustainable change. What creates sustainable change for the deepest, darkest, intractable problems is committed action. And not action by individuals alone, but by committed groups coming together. I am thrilled to have so many committed individuals in the room today who are willing to roll up their sleeves and work. The people on the front lines, the families affected by opiate addiction, our police, and I apologize to them again, who respond to overdoses, our local boards of health who are worried about this every day, our town and opiate task force who has been holding emergency meetings to address this, they need us. They cannot and should not do this alone. That's why we're here today. This is not just a call to action, but a challenge to act. We'll be reconvening here in the spring. We've already talked to the Hampton Inn about it, and trying to negotiate, and learn what action everyone has taken, and we're going to check our progress. I want to thank the Hampton Inn for practically donating the space today for our convening, and my club, Charles River Rotary, for providing breakfast and committing to this issue and to this meeting. If anyone in this room would like to join a small but mighty Rotary Club, we meet here every Thursday, as I said, in a much smaller room downstairs at this time, and we are a club focused on supporting healthy youth. For those of you who aren't familiar with Rotary, we are the largest charitable organization in Massachusetts. Our motto is service above self. I want to recognize all of the Rotarians in the room from clubs in MetroWest and beyond. Rotary clubs exist all over the world. and have successfully addressed one of the major global health problems in recent times by working with the Gates Foundation to eradicate the polio epidemic worldwide. This opiate crisis is the epidemic of this moment and an epidemic in our own community. The numbers are staggering, and the numbers of individuals affected is countless. Many of the Rotarians in my club are veterans and have served and accomplished much in their life. I am honored to meet with them every week. They know that we can do hard things if we put service above self. Along those lines, I challenge you today, for you and your organizations, to put service above self regarding this opiate crisis. In doing so, we also put service above silos that separate our organizations, service above the need for recognition, service above differences, service above judgment, service above status quo. We need to think outside the box to address this issue. And most of all, service above stigma. Through sustained action by all of the organizations in this room, we send the message that we must all act to stop this epidemic. We also send the message that it could affect anyone, and there is no shame attached to this disease. I thank you for your time, and on behalf of the Charles River Rotary, I commit to sustained action on this issue, and I look forward to meeting again soon when we share our success. I want to begin by introducing Natick Chief James Hicks, our featured speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, all, and thank you, Christine, and to the Charles River Rotary for having me back again. Always a pleasure to be able to stand up here and speak to such a fine group. But especially this morning, when I look into the audience and I look at the dais in front of me here, to see how impressive it is. First at 7:15 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, to get this group together. But it kind of a testament to the issue that we're talking about. And I see faces in the room who also have a deep commitment to the subject we're talking about here today. My perspective, because I know that we have a short amount of time to talk about a very, very complicated issue we have here. I want to make sure that, I talked to Christine earlier, that there's enough time for feedback, questions and answers, and also an opportunity for others on the panel to be able to speak. So I decided to take an opportunity to kind of put this in focus using both a personal and professional standpoint as we talk about it specifically in this area about this opioid crisis. Just to tell you how far we've come, although we've come a small way, just the fact that you have so many police officers standing here, one standing here and sitting at the table, is a tremendous accomplishment. Because during my career, over 31 years in law enforcement, you have just as many years sitting up here with my colleagues, the police department was really not a partner in this issue. And when I say not a partner, it's because it wasn't historically what police did. And in our environment, it was just reactive. No, just reactive. And really, we went from one call to another, to another, to another, with very little time to sit back and think about the previous call and the effects that it may have. But things change, for the good. Community policing has become a large part of law enforcement, even many, many years ago. I'm talking about 20 years ago. But even around the issue of addiction, we as law enforcement really did not embrace the partnerships that were available to us. But that has changed, and changed for all the right reasons, in my opinion. And I'm going to just going back to talk about the professional and the personal portion of this, and talk about Natick and what has happened in Natick that is indicated to me. And what has happened in Natick is no different than what's happened in many of the communities around us and around the country. As we go to different conferences, we hear the same story. For me personally, in Natick, where I think that really the shades were pulled up and everything was exposed, is a death. There was an overdose death in 2014. And in 2014, it was a death that really affected the community because it was a family that was well entrenched and well known where this had occurred. The community suffered at that time. It hurt. It really hurt, and the decision was made in order to address that hurt and give a form. We had a vigil. We had a vigil, and I attended that vigil, and I spoke at that vigil. And it was heart-wrenching to realize that there's families out there who are suffering, but they're suffering in silence. They're suffering in silence. That was 2014. The question was asked to me shortly after that, Chief, how bad is the problem? Now, of course, when you talk about problems and issues, everyone wants stats. Give me stats, give me figures. And I said, honestly, I don't know. Let me go back. We have computer-aided, dispatch and record keeping. And I couldn't give them a number before 2014 because we didn't even keep track of events involving overdoses, drug use at that time, which was amazing. And it's kind of indicative of where we were in law enforcement at that time. And we realized that, number one, we had to change because in order to look at the scope of the problem, we had to know what the problem was and where the extent of it was. And at the same time, in that meeting, what ended up happening is that I was able to meet many of those families. And if we go back to the vigil itself, the one thing that I realized and said at the very beginning is that we have a long road to go because there's this image of what addiction is and who's addicted. And that image comes through history that we all been involved in, especially in law enforcement, that was realized was built on a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of families out there who were suffering or have been and still are suffering through this addiction. And yet they suffer in silence because of the stigma that's involved with it, the stigma. Not my child, can't be my child. Where do I fit? I can't let anyone know. So at that point, the realization came that as a community, we had to come together. But the difficult part is that there was no game plan. There is no playbook to say, how do we address this? Now, an amazing thing is, I was at the Natick Rotary on Tuesday, Jim Cuddy spoke, and I took some notes about it. And the one thing that he said that I totally agree with is that the only way to address this particular issue, it has to be a community effort. It cannot be the police, no, and it can't be individuals within a community, but coming together, we can address this. So as a community, we've come together, and in the region we've come together. There's been many, many groups. Natick started the Opioid Task Force. There's many collaborations that's going on, but still, what happens is that it still sometimes gets pushed to the back. I'll give you an example of how I see it and what we looked at. We know that there's stories, Governor Baker has been very good. He has created task force, new laws that come out that start addressing the many complexities that goes with it, whether it's the distribution of pain medications, the amount, the over-distribution, drug take-back days, all those things were happening. But at the same time, interestingly enough, recently, we heard a report, probably I think it was at the third week in August, that opioid deaths are declining. Now, when you hear news like that, you talk about success. We have successes. Although the decline was minimal, when you hear the word decline, you feel as though we got a handle on this, and that we're on the way to solving this problem. so we relax a little. What ended up happening is a perfect example I'll give you in Natick, because at our opioid task force we report overdoses and deaths on a monthly basis. 2014, in Natick, 23 overdoses, 2 deaths. 2015, 24 overdoses, 2 deaths. Everyone says, well, okay, we're stemming the tide. We must be doing something. 2016, 25 overdoses, 3 deaths. Okay, so now we're getting into 2017 and we're hearing that word. Okay, with a lot of programs out there, we must be doing something well. 2017, up through the month of July, now we had 14 overdoses and 1 death at the beginning of July. Remember what I told you about in August is when you heard that word decline? Since August, 8 overdoses, 3 deaths. Since August. Since it was announced we have a decline. And that's because of what we're seeing in the field, especially in law enforcement around the fentanyl. It's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And these products are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So my message today is that we have even more work to do. And I remember, I was trying to come up with an analogy. What analogy can I use to show where we are today and where we need to go with this crisis? And I thought of different things, and so here's an interesting thing. I want to kind of bring it together, a little bit of cartoons and a little bit of reality. So think about a big freight train that's invisible. And for many, many years, this freight train was up on a hill. And at the bottom of the hill is our communities. And our communities. And if that train comes through our community, it's going to destroy us. But this train is invisible. So although we can see up on the hill and it looks beautiful up there, for many, many years, this train was slowly slipping. The brakes were slipping a little bit. I'm not talking about dark times now? Yeah. The brakes on the train were slowly slipping. But as a community, we couldn't see it because it was invisible. And the invisibleness of the train indicates the invisibleness of the problem and the disease, because it is a disease that was hidden for many, many years in our communities with our families. Some of the police knew about it, but again, we weren't the partners. We were just doing what police do. So that train is slowly slipping away. The brakes are slowly giving away. Now, the brakes have failed. The brakes have failed, and as it's coming closer to our communities, we see this runaway train. And we can look at it in one or two ways. We can say, it's too big for us. Let's get out of its way and let it go by. And hopefully, it won't damage anything that belongs to me. That's one way we can look at it. The other way we can look at it is that we have to band together. And as this train is on a decline, we come together as a community and say, you know what? We have a short period of time. What we need to do is we need to build new tracks. We need to build new tracks that will not only slow that train down and get it to the point that it's at least level so that we can deal with stopping the train. But we need to do it quickly because it's a train. It doesn't go slow. And as we build that new track, and as that train comes to a slow stop, we will eventually come together as a community and figure out a way to get in front of that train and saying, not our community, will come together and it will come to a stop. Now, I just told you fantasy. Really, I did. It's a story that you can make up, and a story that's going to be a great cartoon. But the fact of the matter is, you've got to turn that fantasy into reality, because that's exactly what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the runaway train, and although halfway down that hill, it may show that it's slowed down 2 miles an hour, like the decline we saw in August, it's still coming. It's still coming. And what we see just as the numbers we have here in Natick, and I look at the numbers for Middlesex, this is slowing, but it's not stopping. And we have a lot of work to do, because think about that when you leave here, is that invisible train. Who is on that train? And it's our community members. It's not the stereotypical 25 years ago who's addicted to drugs. It's our family members. These numbers I gave you, and especially some of the numbers about deaths in the last couple of weeks here in Natick, are families who are fighting this addiction problem. Who came out and says, I want to work with the community, and the community wants to work with them. But yet we lost in this particular case. This tells me it's not slowing down. This tells me that there's no decline. This tells me, and the message we have out there is that we still have a lot of work to do. We have task force, we have laws, but we need more. We need a community. And both Rotaries came to me and says, what can we do? And that's such a hard question to answer, because there's so much. It's like anything else. There's so much to be done, and so much that needs to be done. And again, Jim Cuddy said something yesterday that really touched me right towards the end of his presentation on Tuesday, is that we cannot look at this and say it's impossible. We cannot look at that runaway train and say it's much bigger than us, I can't stop it. We don't have a choice. We're losing too many people. And I'm not saying losing to death particularly, losing to the addiction and what goes with the addiction and how it affects our community. And that's whether it's been for us, increases in larcenies and breaking and entering in cars and homes. That all affects all of us. Whether you know that or not. Hopefully leave here today knowing it does affect our community. And with that, this is where we need to ramp it up even more. And I go back to 2014 at the vigil. We need to ramp it up even more, but the one thing we can't say, and the one thing we have to get rid of, is the stigma. Get rid of the stigma, and then that train becomes visible to all of us. We need to know that the problem is out there, and we need to deal with it in our families and in our communities. So we're committed. Everyone at this table is committed, and you'll hear from them. I'm probably over my 20 minutes already. I said I'm going to keep it short, but we need to be committed as a community. Whether you're a leader, whether you're a volunteer, you need to be committed, and we need to push forward. We cannot stop. We don't have a choice. And we can't do it alone. We need to do that together as a community. And that's what we offer. I know I offer that. The other law enforcement offers that, and every one of our partners up here, we offer that to all. But let's leave here today knowing that we have a tremendous challenge ahead of us. A tremendous challenge ahead of us that we don't have a choice, that we need to resolve. We need to stop that train. We need to stop that train, and we need all hands on deck. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hicks. So we're going to be hearing in a second from some other perspectives on this issue, but before that I wanted to invite any of our, because we're a regional club and obviously this is a regional problem, I wanted to invite up any of our police leaders if there's anything else you wanted to share about your community and some thoughts. I know that we didn't ask you to prepare anything, but it would be great to just get any quick insights before we hear from the parent perspective.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. Chief Hicks, thank you. Well said remarks and very, very accurate and poignant. I think what's gotten us into a lot of this problem of why we're at today is apathy. And the reason why I say that is because Chief Hicks, Chief Trask, we've all been in this industry. We've all come from the same vintage, about 30 plus years. I hate to say that, but 30 plus years in this business. And I know when I first started as a detective in Framingham, I looked at this whole opiate problem as a whole different lens. As a matter of fact, Representative Linsky was one of my prosecutors when he was with the Middlesex District Attorney's Office. but I looked at it as a very narrow lens, and heroin at the time was looked at as this real representative, this really underbelly of society. It's them that are doing this. It's no one that I know. It's no one from my, section of the community. They're doing it to themselves, and they're responsible for a lot of the crimes that police were confronted with at the time: theft, prostitution, robberies. So we looked at these folks with a lot of disdain. It was strictly an enforcement lens. We would arrest them, bring them to the DA's office for prosecution, and then would be out on the streets, going out and undercover, buying more heroin from people and doing the same cycle over and over and over again without any thought about the addictive properties that took hold on these young kids that led them to this point, without any thought of the trauma left behind as the families you heard Chief Hicks talk about. And heroin use was really done in the back alley, in a dark corner somewhere. And today, and because we had that sort of built-in apathy back then, that carried us through where we are today. Because when we hear opiate addiction, heroin addiction, we think back to our experiences from years ago, and it got away from us because we never really kept an eye on the ball, as this thing took hold within the past 10 years. And now heroin use and heroin dealings and addiction isn't taking place in a back alley somewhere. It's not taking place in a dark corner somewhere. It's taking place in a bedroom, in a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb. It's taking place in an employee break room, in a bathroom at a suburban shopping mall or a grocery store. So the face of heroin addiction has changed drastically. Most people get involved with heroin addiction through opioid use that was either legitimately prescribed or taken out of someone's medicine cabinet as an experiment, as young kids will do, make wrong decisions, and then unfortunately it takes hold of them and they have no control over if they can stop or not. And that's what we really have to look at is this is an illness. It's not a law enforcement issue, and you've heard Chief Hicks talk about that it really has to be a community-wide perspective. It's a public health crisis, as you've heard that term before. But historically, we've always looked at this as, hey, we've got this is a law enforcement issue, community, stand back, we're going to take care of that. And we never looked at the community as a partner in this. And now we look at this as in a profoundly different way, and some of the lessons have been learned through the whole philosophy of community policing that policing in general have learned, that we realize that we have to look at the stakeholders in the community, and we have to look at who our partners are to really help us. And there isn't a police department, I know in this state, that doesn't look at the community as a partner in this role. And we all look to our local boards of health, we look to our Drug and Alcohol Coalition. I know Kristen French is here from Decisions That Have Returned from Ashland, and Mark Warren from our Board of Health. And these are our partners now. The school department is our partners. The fire department are our partners. Hospitals are our partners. We look at a place in places that were very non-traditional to form partnerships, help us work together on this issue. Not solve it, but work together on this issue. Because if we think we're going to solve it, we're just going to frustrate ourselves. And you're going to throw your hands up and say, well, this didn't work, so forget it, I'm out. But we have to keep trying at this because it is such a difficult problem. And once a person's addicted to it, this is a lifelong addiction. They're going to fight with this the rest of their lives in some form or another. So, and one of the frustrating things for us in policing, because we're on the front lines, and I'm sure my brothers in the fire department would say the same thing, is that when you bring someone to the hospital, we're frustrated because we think, okay, they're at the hospital, and now they're going to finally get a pathway into treatment. That doesn't necessarily happen, and often, even a person who wants to go to treatment, it sometimes takes 9 times, statistically, 9 times for them to get into treatment before they finally enter the next phase into recovery. So it is a frustrating process, and sometimes we look at this and like, oh, we just dealt with this person last week or last month, I'm done trying to get him or her help. But we can't look at this problem that way. We have to keep it being resilient, just like they have to be resilient with their treatment and recovery efforts. And that's where I think a lot of the community support comes in, is the treatment and recovery and support, family support efforts. We do what we can on the front lines, but then there's that whole back end, and that takes, I think, more effort than what we're doing. Because of that amount of effort that's required for treatment and recovery and family support, that's where the real effort takes place. I mean, we respond to a lot of these things. We work with community partners to try to be as proactive as we can. But then there's that whole back-end network that if that isn't in place, if that isn't shored up, if that isn't supported, then what we do is just going to keep failing. So we do look at community partners, and that's where the true successes are going to lie in this fight against opiates. And I think one of the reasons why you're going to see some successes in the decline of overdose deaths is sort of a false statistic, is because more and more police departments are using Narcan, nasal Narcan. So if we rewound the clock 5 years ago, very few departments were using nasal Narcan. Now many police departments are using nasal Narcan. And why does that have any kind of an impact? Well, just since last year, we've used in Ashland nasal Narcan 26 times. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot for a small community, because I know in 2014 when the Ashland Police Department got nasal Narcan, I'll be honest with you, I really didn't think we would be using it that much. I figured maybe once or twice a year in a small suburban community, you know, okay, but we're going to have it, because the last thing I want to do is have our officers stand over some 18, 19, 20-year-old kid waiting for an ambulance, which is, you know, a long time, as good and fast as they are, but it's still a lifetime as you're watching someone not breathing. So all of our officers thankfully agreed to carry Narcan, and that has lent substantially to the amount of young people's lives that we have saved. Because when we get to a call and someone's not breathing, we feel so helpless. So with that tool, we're able to restore some immediate life-saving measures. But I think that's helped with this sort of false positive feeling about, you know, the decline in deaths because of more and more first responders are carrying Narcan. I know the fire department folks have carried it for quite some time, but, you know, as I mentioned, we're often, you know, right there immediately. So, you know, every second counts when you can restore somebody's breathing. As a matter of fact, the Narcan that we had distributed to our officers just 2 years ago is now almost ineffective, because heroin is now being laced with fentanyl. I'm sure you've all heard about fentanyl and carfentanil, but it's so much more powerful than heroin. So our Narcan wasn't being effective. So now we have to increase and buy double doses of Narcan to restore somebody's breathing. So even that is changing. So this whole opioid problem keeps shifting and has different nuances as, you know, and permeances as we continue. But I know every community represented here is doing a lot, and you know, the whole point of success, the whole pathway to success is really community partnership. So I applaud you in your efforts in wanting to get involved with this. So I won't belabor the point. Thank you.
I don't know if Chief Trask wanted to say a few words before we then get perspectives from community and actually the federal level as well.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief because I can't really add much more than both Chief Hicks and Chief Davis. Very similar. We're experiencing very similar things in Framingham. The numbers are a little higher, as you would expect, a bigger community. But as Chief Hicks was speaking, I was looking at writing his numbers down. Almost identical trends in Framingham and Middlesex County at large. We were lulled into this false sense of accomplishment with some of our declines. In 2016 in Framingham, we had 125 overdoses and 11 fatalities. And thus far in 2017, through August, we've had 56 overdoses and 3 fatalities. But we had 12 overdoses in August alone. And I don't have September's numbers completed yet, but I know I think we've had 3 fatalities in September. So the numbers maybe, the year-end numbers may look good, but we're seeing another boost here in August and September. And when you hear about those numbers in a community like Framingham, you know, 10, 11, 12 fatalities, that's a lot. That's a tremendous amount. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to some of our partners. I see Marty Cohen from the MetroWest Healthcare Foundation. Marty's been a phenomenal partner to us. Everything we've always asked for, he and his folks have given to us. Purchasing the nasal Narcan for us, which is huge. Orchestrating discussions with our caregivers and providers in the community, and I can't say enough and thank you enough, Marty, for the work you've been doing. And it is a community effort, Chief, you're absolutely right. We are not going to solve this, we're not going to rush our way out of this. We need to come together as a community and find other ways to deal with it. I'll just speak real briefly on some of the things that we're doing in Framingham. We have the Framingham Cares Initiative. Chief Davis, when he was a member of the proud Framingham Police Department, one of his brainchilds was the jail diversion program. So we have emergency psychiatric clinicians embedded in the police department. They're with us 16 hours a day in our building. And they've also taken on the added role of when we have an overdose, they go to the hospital and they intervene with these individuals. They give them information, they give them support, they introduce them to a recovery coach, and try and get them strike while iron is hot, because as Chief Davis said so many times, it's not the first time, it's the 7th, the 8th, the 9th time. You just have to keep trying to hit that nail and try and get some success. Since we've implemented that program, it's about a year old, so we've responded to 94 overdoses. 80 of those received Narcan. 14% of those folks accepted treatment immediately after that. There were still 10 fatalities in those numbers. So 14% is not a great number, but it's a number that we're hope to increase, and it's a different approach that I think we need to look at, because it's a multifaceted approach that's going to get us through this problem. I think I'll end there because, again, most of our experience is very similar to the other communities, and we'll let some of the other folks at the table have their say. Thank you very much for having me here this morning.
Thank you, Chief. I think we're just so lucky to have all of these police officers and leaders here today to get the perspective of how this issue is facing all of MetroWest. And like I said, these issues don't stop at our borders. And we really are here today to come together so we can support these first responders and ask what we can do to help. The other group that we are really thinking about are, of course, the parents of both the children and young people and not so young people who have overdosed, and of those we've lost. I want to introduce now Cheryl Lucenta, who is a hero among all of the heroes at this dais, but Cheryl started an organization called SOAR, which is called Supporting Our Addicts Recovery. I have the privilege in the work that I do of meeting incredible individuals, and she is at the top. In a very dark issue, she has stepped up to be a voice. She runs a group at the Natick Library twice a month for parents of young people who are recovering opiate addicts. And I asked her to come today to share her perspective with you. And she, in the handout that you have, she gave her list of kind of what you can do, so you can look at that while she's talking. Cheryl.
Thank you, Christine, and to all of the representatives of the police departments that are here today. As Christine said, my name is Cheryl Lucenta. I currently serve as a community member and chair of the Natick Opioid Task Force, but today I'm here to talk as a representative and member of SOAR Natick. And the flyer that you all have explains what SOAR does, so I'm not going to waste my limited speaking time on that. Instead, try to give you a little background. You can see our mission statement there. You can see how our organization was formed, but what you can't see or even imagine is what families who need this support go through. A family that has a child with substance use disorder, a lot of people call that addiction, is broken. And I speak from experience. I have a child who's been in recovery for nearly 5 years now, but our family will never be the same. This can happen to any one of us. That's right. Even if you have dinner every night as a family, involve your kids in every sport and activity, had the best family and friend group, went to church, and never drank in front of them. Once it starts, you can't parent your way out of this. In the past 2 months, 2 of our founding members of our group have lost their sons, just 24 and 25 years old. Their names can be added to what is becoming a long list of MetroWest families that have lost a child to addiction. I'm proud to be part of a community that has made a commitment to making a difference. We're making real progress, but there's still a long way to go. With the support of groups like Rotary and the others here today, I'm hopeful that together we can help the families that need us. Thank you for making this a priority.
Thank you, Cheryl. And like I said, on one of the handouts, there's a list of specific things from an attorney that's needed to help SOAR become a 501c3 so they can receive donations. There's a list of different, and I know I wish I could go around and introduce everybody in this room because I'm so grateful. But we do have members of the schools, we have the clergy, we have the town, we have, obviously Representative Linsky, we have so many people here. She gives suggestions, and also for hospitals and healthcare workers, what can we do? Because like I said, everybody's asking that, and we want to give answers because this is about action. I think we still have awareness, we still have to address awareness, but action is a real big component. So in those lines, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Katie Sugarman, who really I view as another hero in this area, who has run Natick Together for Youth in Natick and is also on the Natick Opiate Task Force, and she's going to speak more from the town level about the response to this issue. Thank you, Katie.
Good morning. I hope you don't mind if I'm going to speak a little off the cuff because there's been so much already talked about today that I just want to kind of build upon. But I first want to just honor Cheryl and the other parents in this room and in our region who are directly touched by this issue. I have said in some of these types of community forums before and in meetings with some of these parents as well. These are the folks who are making a difference, and they are showing in so many ways how we can each step up in our own little worlds to kind of contribute to this issue. It's really overwhelming to think about the scope of this problem, and we've heard, especially from law enforcement, what they're seeing on the front lines. To stop and think about what we can each do to contribute to the solution, I can just give a quick example of one of the ways that SOAR Natick has contributed to solutions. We, as Christine mentioned, I've been a part of Natick Together for Youth for the past 3+ years. It's been a grant-funded organization working on prevention, and it's done really wonderful work connecting people. But the reality is that we do need to invest resources, sustainable long-term resources, in actually finding solutions to this issue. And so parents from SOAR Natick came together after one of our vigils a couple of years ago and said, okay, we need to make sure elected officials in our community understand the scope of this problem. And they started hosting forums, specifically roundtable forums for the folks who are running for elected positions to make sure that they understood the scope of this issue in their community. And now I'm proud to say that the town of Natick has actually invested in creating at least one full-time position focused on addressing this issue, but there's no question we need more resources. I can imagine that sitting in this room, it can feel overwhelming wondering, okay, well then what can I do? I am not personally impacted by this, or my family isn't personally impacted, but I know people in my neighborhood have been, or I know people in my church have been. One of the first things you can do is really get educated on this issue. And education can sometimes sound like, oh, get educated, get awareness. This can sound like kind of touchy-feely or, superficial things. But the scope of this problem goes really, really deep. And it really requires a level of empathy that is not always understood. And when I say empathy, I mean getting outside of your comfort zone in some of these topics. The example of Narcan, it has been a life-saving agent in our state. It's also been a controversial life-saving agent in our state. There have been plenty of debates about, are we, quote, enabling people? The reality is, and this, for lack of a more delicate term. This is actually a phrase that you hear a lot of times in the treatment addiction recovery circles, is you can't get a dead person clean. You can't get a person who is no longer living and breathing into recovery. And so sometimes this conversation requires all of us to stretch outside of our comfort zones and think about how do we support individuals where they are now until they're ready to get to the next step in life. And sometimes there's a concept for this, a model for this called harm reduction. The idea that we're trying to reduce harm until somebody's ready to take the next step. Some of us do that in our everyday lives, right? Those of us who have, tried to lose weight here or there, we've, okay, I'm gonna cut sugar from my diet. Or, well, okay, sugar's a big step. Sugar's in everything. So maybe I can cut sugar in my coffee in the morning. Maybe I can, make sure I put more veggies on my plate at dinner. Those are really tiny examples. But you can think about how hard it is to make a change that's so embedded in your life. Think about what it's like when a chemical has actually hijacked your brain. And that is what the loved ones that we're seeing in communities all around this region are dealing with. They are dealing with these chemicals that are so much more powerful than anything anyone in this room or outside of this room may have dabbled in 20 or 30 years ago. This crisis has taken years to build to where it is right now. It's going to take years to dig ourselves out. We're making small progress in little ways. I mean, the examples that we've just heard from our law enforcement community today, those are huge. The fact that we have law enforcement, like Chief Hicks said, and the rest of our chiefs from Ashland and Framingham said, that they are not just at the table, but saying, yes, we need Narcan, we need to take action, we're ready to meet people where they are. Natick now has officers going out and doing post-overdose follow-up. We have amazing officers in Natick, and I know our surrounding communities do, that care deeply about helping these people, and not because they're sick and tired of seeing them, but because they see the families, they see the brokenness, they see the hurt that Cheryl was talking about. So when I say build awareness and get educated, I'm just gonna give you a few quick resources, and some of these are in some of the documents that were handed out today, but learntocope.org. LEARN, 2, cope.org. Parent organization that started small and is changing lives throughout Massachusetts. There's so much good education there about what it's like to love someone who's going through this. mass.gov/chapter 55. That is the central website for the state that gives a big picture overview of the opioid crisis around Massachusetts. And then harmreduction.org. That is a nonprofit, a national nonprofit that's working on trying to meet people where they are until they're ready to take the next step into treatment. So again, I'm so grateful to have all of you in the room, and my challenge to you is to be prepared to stretch outside of your comfort zone, to think about how can we support these families and individuals where they are. There isn't a prescribed solution to this. But we all working together can make a difference. So thank you for your attention to this issue.
Thank you, Katie. A number of the resources that Katie cited are in that booklet that was given to you as you came in, that the town of Natick created, including Learn to Cope. And I want to also we all begin with ourselves. I want to say on behalf of Rotary, this is an issue that we are committed to as a club ourselves, but I want to recognize we have Rotary clubs from MetroWest and beyond here, representatives, and we are bound to really work together on this issue, that this is going to be a collaboration to support this issue, not only in awareness, but resources. Finally, our final speaker before we open up for some quick Q&A, John Featherston is the past president of Charles River Rotary. He's going to talk briefly about his work on the national level. He's on the national task force to address the opiate crisis, appointed by Governor Baker, who was appointed by Governor Christie, I believe. So, welcome, John.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming today, and you've all heard it, and we all understand what the problem is. But I had the opportunity last week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was in Boston a week ago today. And he actually had a closed-door meeting that I was fortunate enough to be in with local law enforcement leaders. And he referred to this as the biggest public health crisis in America. And we went through all the stats as we've done here today and everything. And as I go to these meetings on the state and on the federal level, and I'm a member of an infamous Board of Health even, on a local level, I do it because we try to make a difference. And you go to these federal meetings and everybody wants to regulate this problem. And as the chiefs have spoken today, you're not going to regulate your way out of this. This is a human crisis. And we have to put a stake in the ground. And, you know, I often always say all politics is local. The federal government can't fix this problem. Governor Baker can't fix this problem. But everybody in this room can fix this problem. And we have to fix this problem. It's too big of a, the deaths get the headlines. But the reality is the opiate crisis is much bigger than the deaths. It's the loss of productivity. It's the stress and strain on families, employers, friends and neighbors. So somebody has to put the stake in the ground to stop the train that Chief Hicks talked about. One of the things that the Charles River Rotary does is we give third graders every year dictionaries in the public and private schools. And it's a wonderful event. And we sit there and we talk to the children about what Rotary is and why Rotary was established. And Rotary really was established to eradicate polio. And you look at these third graders and they look at you and go, what's polio? And thank God they don't know what polio is. Wouldn't it be wonderful 30 years from now that they didn't know what opiate addiction was? And that's what we have to do here. We talk about the stigma. It's not okay that you're addicted to heroin or opiates, but we're going to help you. And that's what we have to do. We have to do it on the local level. And if we do it in the MetroWest area and it goes into the Boston area and everything like that, we're making a difference. And that's why I'm so happy today. I'm happy for Christine for organizing this, and I thank you all for coming.
We still have, thank you, John. We still have a few minutes before our official end. If anybody has any questions to ask the panel members? Okay.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I'm Penny from the Nate Rotary Club. I just want to put a little clearer face on this. I'm sure appreciates to be quiet. 13 years ago, I started with Boston Homeless in a van going around the city of Boston, many vans picking up indigent, getting people out. Now, over the last 6, 7, 8 years, we are administering Narcan numerous times a night to people in the inner city that are coming to get their drugs in the inner city from out here in the MetroWest. So this is very real. We're seeing people in suit and ties in the Sheraton bathrooms, as the chief noted. This is an issue. Fentanyl is so damn easy to get these days. It's coming in from China via the U.S. mail. This is something that's not stopped. It can't be stopped. And we see it. We see the fentanyl deaths now. We see all this stuff. Fentanyl is real. I'm passionate about it because we see it so often. I see it in real life. I see people die. This is the real thing. And I just want to thank everybody for being here.
Thank you. Bob Anthony from Wellesley Rotary.
Thank you so much. The region for Rotary is 7910, Central Massachusetts. We have at least 30 teen groups, all called Interact, in the 50 communities that have Rotary clubs. Is there a program for the Interact teams or something that they can implement? Is there a model? Please. So ages 12 to 18 is the question. Is there existing program suitable for ages 12 to 18 that our Interact clubs can introduce or sponsor?
Unfortunately, not that I'm aware of, but I mean, it's definitely something, that's a great conversation starter.
So in terms of education, if you're looking for like an educational curriculum, one that's out there that is considered evidence-based is called Life Skills. And it's by a publisher named Botman. It's a curriculum that doesn't focus, it doesn't focus specifically on the opioid crisis, but part of this larger conversation is what are the underlying contributing factors that can contribute or put somebody at higher risk for opioid addiction. To Cheryl's point, there's no prescription that's going to protect anybody from addiction. I mean, everybody is at risk in some capacity, but some of what the life skills curriculum gets at is focused on increasing young people's coping strategies, talking about healthy relationships, trying to get kids, trying to focus on some of the social emotional wellness components that will then increase the protective factors that can help reduce the risk for addiction. That's one out there. There are other evidence-based models and curriculum that I'd be happy to talk with you about more if you'd like.
Thank you.
I just want to add one quick thing. There is a STEM-based program aimed at middle and high school kids called Operation Prevention. And you can go on the web and find all the information for that and some of the curriculum for that and outreach material for it. It's called Operation Prevention. It's a STEM-based program that's aimed specifically at middle and high school kids.
I hope everybody shared their email coming in. If you haven't, please share it with me. We will follow up. We will find you. We will follow up with everybody in this room, and we'll share the resources that people are sharing here, so you'll have all of that. Yes?
Just very quickly, I want to acknowledge Bob Anthony's work through Wellesley Rotary and his adolescent wellness program, which his club and Rotary International is now promoting all over the world. Bob will be speaking next week on Tuesday at noon at the Dolphin Restaurant in downtown Natick. You're welcome to join us on his program, which I think is invaluable and deals specifically with ideational depression in high school students, which is a key indicator, I think, in a lot of what we're talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yes?
Yes, I'm Mark Gorham, by the way. I'm the other person. I serve under John. John Featherston's a great person to serve under. It's the first thing I'd like to say. But more importantly, I'm a fellow Rotarian of all the Rotarians in here. I'm out of the Marlboro Club. We do have a big problem here, one of the biggest I've ever seen. I've been in public health my whole life. I would recommend, if you haven't seen the network overview on this, ABC did a overview 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday night where they interacted with the local networks. So Channel 5 in Boston would come on for 10 minutes, ABC would go back. But the one thing that hit me was the commissioner from the Department of Public Health in Baltimore. She's an emergency room doctor, and people that work in emergency rooms, they see it every day. So don't your fire departments, your police departments. It chokes you up when you hear the stories. But that commissioner indicated we need to remove the stigma. I faced it as a city councilor 3 years ago. They didn't want to, I couldn't believe it. They didn't want to bring up the fact that our officers needed to carry Narcan. And I'm like, what? You know, I couldn't believe it because the story came out of Quincy that a Quincy officer was in Boston and saved a life because Boston wasn't carrying it either. But my point to the commissioner in Baltimore, and like I say, I choke up sometimes on this stuff. The commissioner in Baltimore made it very clear we need to treat this no different than the way we treated heart disease. You're not going to let someone die from heart disease if they're in a heart attack mode at the point. You try to save them. That's where the Narcan comes in. And then after treatment for heart patients. We should look at it no differently. It has no borders, socially, demographically, and I thank everyone in this room, and I hope we continue to fight this because it's a major challenge, and I look forward to Rotary also being a major factor in helping to promote this opioid crisis from going away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, yes. Representative Linsky.
Good morning. Thank you very much to Rotary for the people coming out and inviting me this morning. I've been in the legislature a long, long time, and there's probably been no issue that I've dealt with in the last 19 years that is more frustrating and heart-wrenching than this one. For anybody who knows me, what I'm probably most passionate about, I know what I'm most passionate about, is my 3 sons, all of whom are in their early 20s right now. You know, thankfully, you know, my family has not been directly touched by this, but I can tell you I am sick and tired of going to Everett's. And, you know, I've gone to Everett's for kids that I coached in Little League or I coached in youth football in Natick. And this is, you know, incredibly, incredibly upsetting, difficult, and personal for me. You know, this is not a Democratic issue, this is not a Republican issue, this is not a liberal issue, this is not a conservative issue, this is a community public health issue. And I take that from, as Craig pointed out, somebody who started his career as a prosecutor, and we thought we knew what we were doing 30 years ago, and we didn't, quite frankly. You know, I do not have any of the answers to this, none. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm relying on the people in this room and who are involved in this and know a whole lot more about this issue than I ever will, because I can tell you that the state legislature, to a person, is looking for answers and searching for anything that we can do as a state. You know, if it's resources, you got them. If it's treatment beds, you got them. If it's changes in insurance, you got them. I mean, we will do whatever it takes, but we don't know. And so we're searching for those answers. So I just wanted to thank Rotary and the people for being here, and to tell you, you know, if you have answers, tell me, because I don't know them. But thank you very much, and just giving me the opportunity to vent about how I feel about this. So thank you.
We're at 8:30, and I'm sure we have other questions, but I want to respect everybody's time. And I think that's a wonderful note to end on, the fact that this issue is a huge, tremendous challenge, but it's one that unites all of us. It's something that needs all of us and all of our talents and all of our thinking and all of our dedication to address. I thank everybody, all of the police officers and leaders who spoke, and Cheryl and Katie and John and Representative Linsky and everybody, all of your questions, and everyone for being here. This is the beginning. We are going to follow up with all of you. Like I said, we'd love to hear your ideas about what we can do. I know we have leaders from all different aspects of the community here, and for that I'm very grateful. So we are going to follow up with you with all the resources today that were cited. And we will be also hearing from Rotary. We're going to be organizing together as clubs around what we can do to support all of our first responders on this issue and all of our families that we are thinking about always. So thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it, and you'll be hearing from us, and we're going to be meeting again here in the spring, and we're looking forward to reporting some successes in addressing these issues. Thank you.